Hey friends, it's Cassie. Welcome back for another Trinity Stamps video. Today I'm going to be focusing on the Coffee Cozy hand stitching die, and I can't wait to share what I made today. We're not making a card. We're going to focus on using felt and this gorgeous die to make some really fun gifts, or keep some for yourself. So this is what I had. I grabbed out some felt that I had bought from Benzie Designs, and this was in the Harvest Moon palette. And I cut out some scallops. I also cut out 3 flowers, and I did cut out 3 of the leaves. You'll notice that these dies will cut out stitching, so it'll make it a little easier for you to see where you're supposed to put your stitching. But always keep in mind with things like this that you can put your stitching through those holes, and you can even put some of your own stitching, and I will show some of that. I did cut out a circle, and then of course I cut out the actual cozy piece. And I went crazy making things. So I'm going to show you a little bit about how to do it. You don't need to be some sort of a sewing pro to do something like this, and it's super fun to just kind of sit in front of the TV or wherever you are, and you can just stitch these up very quickly if you just cut out a bunch of the different pieces. I highly suggest when you get your pieces cut out, you will pin them in place. So I'm pinning my circle where I want it, basically sort of in the center of my cozy, and so I'm just taking a straight pin and I'm just pinning that in place. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just needs to be down there. Then I'm going to pick out the thread that I want to use, and this is the thread I'm using. When I bought the Benzie Designs felt, I bought the Harvest Moon felt, and I also bought the Harvest Moon floss. And Trinity Stamps paired up with Benzie to make their own little palette. So there is a Trinity palette in the Benzie store, and I'll have that linked down below. And you can get the felt, and you can get matching floss to go with it. All right, so I'm cutting down what I need, or roughly about what I think I need, and then I'm going to take an embroidery needle, and I'm going to put my thread through the needle. Now, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work as well. You just have to be a little bit patient, and you can kind of wet it with your mouth if you need to, and then kind of just slip it through. I use all 6 strands that come on the embroidery floss. Depending on what kind of projects you are using, you can split the floss and use less strands if you need to, but for something like this, 6 strands is very nice. So I'm going to put a knot at the very end of my floss, and it's not enough, so I'm going to go ahead and put 1 more knot. And like I said, there may be a better way to do this, but for somebody who's like a beginner like myself, this works really well. So now I've got a pretty decent size knot, and this is what's going to hold my floss, or keep my floss from going all the way through. So when I do my first stitch, that knot is going to keep it in place. So what I'm doing is I'm going from the bottom, and all of my holes are already cut, so I'll poke my embroidery needle through one of the holes, and then I'll just push through to the next hole right next to it. And here we have it started. And then I'm going to go to the next hole, and we're basically going to do what is called back stitching. So you'll notice it's called back stitching, at least I think this is the reason why it's named that, is because you go forward and then you come back to actually get your stitch. I like to keep mine fairly nice in the back, so I'm going to go back into that hole that I first started for the back, not the very first hole, but the one I did for back stitching, and then I'm going to go forward, and then when I do my next one, I'm going to go into the hole next to it, and then I'll back stitch back in. And then that hole that I just went into, I'm going to go back into it for my next stitch, and I'm going to do this all the way around that circle. I end up not having enough floss, and that's okay. You can just end it, and then you will tie it off at the end, which I'll show you, and then you just get more floss and do what you got to do. So once I get to the very end here, I'll show you how I close it up. And this is how my back looks. It's not perfect, but it's okay because, you know, nobody's really going to be paying too much attention to the back. I mean, you don't want it to be super messy, but you also can't completely avoid that there's going to be stuff in the background. All right, so this is how I close it off. It's probably not real technical. I do a lot of knots. So I'll do my first knot. I'll loop into one of the previous stitches, and then I'll stick my needle through that, and then I'll pull my needle out, and because this is 6 strands, I'm actually going to separate it 3 and 3. And then I'm just going to tie 2 knots. So I'll tie a knot and double knot it basically. But that's really all I do to end a stitch. And like I said, I'm sure there's a much neater, better way to do it, but if you're a beginner, this is just fine. And then I'll snip off the excess thread, and then we can move on to finishing all those pieces. So I finished the circle, and I'm going to show you how I attach the scallop. So I make sure everything is good and lined up, and I use about 4 needles to make sure that this is in place. This is definitely an area where you're going to want to use some straight needles to make sure that everything is kind of in place, because trying to just hold it and stitch it isn't going to work. You will find that you'll probably end up messing up, or you'll have too much on the back end, or you may not have enough when you get there. So I'm going to go through that same process all over again, going through all those stitches, back stitching, and I will have both of those scalloped edges attached top and bottom to my cozy. And then when I get to the end, I'm going to have plenty of thread left over. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to leave it attached, because leaving it attached is what is going to help me close up the cozy so that it actually will fit around a cup. So there it is. There's some excess thread, and then we'll attach that bottom scallop as well. Now for the next part, I went ahead and kind of placed things out and pinned down my leaves, and you're going to want to work from back to front. And so what I'll do is I'll take out the needle on one of the leaves once I've got them placed down where I want them. And then I am going to go through the whole stitching process again with the leaves. I'm not going to close off each one. Once I get this started, I'm actually just going to go ahead and do all of the leaves all at once using the same stitching that I've been doing. And once I get all those attached, like I said, just, not closing it off, just keep going. I'll move on to the next leaf, and then the next leaf, and then we'll actually keep that same thread, and we're going to use that on our flowers. All right, now that all the leaves are attached, we're going to bring in our flowers again, and I'm going to pin down 2 of the flowers just to make sure that I have good placement. And then you notice that these flowers only have the 1 stitch hole in the center. I'm going to use that stitch hole, but I'm going to add stitching of my own, just because I want to make sure that these are very good and secure. And there are other ways that you could keep it secure, but this is how I'm going to do it. So I'll pin those down, and then I'm going to come in from the center. I believe I'm coming in from the center, using the same thread that I've been using for the leaves. Here's where I'll make my own stitching. So I'm going to come in the middle of one of the petals. And it's a little bit more difficult because you're just kind of eyeballing, trying to figure out where that hole is going to go. And once I have that placed in between those petals where I want it, I'll pull all the way through, and then I'm going to go into the center stitch. And keeping in mind I'm going through several layers of felt. And then I'm going to skip every other petal, and I'm going to do the same thing. So I'll end up with 4 stitches that will keep my flower in place. And I will do that for all 3 of those flowers. All right, here's where I want to bring in an extra embellishment. You'll notice I put some little buttons up at the top. And so using that exact same thread that I've been using this whole time, I'm going to attach a button down to the center of each of those flowers. So what I'll do is I'm actually going to go into the center of one of the flowers, put it through the first hole of the button, then put that through the second hole of the button, and go right down through the center again. And that is going to place my button. And I'll do that for all 3. Super, super easy way to add a little bit extra to your little cozy. And there you have all 3 attached to our cozy. And I just think this is so stinking cute. Now the next step is to cut holes on the straight edge, and you'll do that with this die that you see here. Cutting those holes is going to put your stitching holes in. So run that through your die cutting machine. You don't have to run the whole thing through, just that die. And then I'm going to poke all the little holes through using a paper piercer or a piercing tool. And this way I'll be able to see those holes a little bit better. And using the leftover red thread that I had from attaching my scallops, I'm now going to attach my cozy to the other side. I do suggest using pins, straight pins, to connect it. I didn't. It didn't end up being too much of a problem, but this way you don't have to keep reattaching or refocusing, if you know what I'm talking about. And there is the cozy all finished up. I think that's so fun. I did want to show you another way that you can attach pieces without necessarily having to stitch everything. I do have this cozy ready to go. I did stitch some scallops and a circle, but I have an M. As you notice, that M comes from the Marshmallow alphabet die. And then I cut out the flower piece and the 2 leaves, and I have another one of those little buttons. And what I'm going to use is a glue gun. I'm going to use this mini hot glue gun with a precision tip. This I found actually makes it a little easier to get the amount of glue that I need and not burn myself as easily as I do with my other glue gun. So I really like this precision tip on here. And I'm just going to put that all over the back of the M. Trying not to go too thick with my glue. The reason for that is it'll make it really stiff, and I don't want it to be really, really stiff. But this glue will hold pretty nicely to this felt and keep everything exactly where it needs to go. Once I have enough glue on that back, now I'm going to attach it down to my circle. And then we're going to place our leaves and our flower on there as well. Just to kind of take a look at where I want those. But that M is down. That M stands for Mattingly. This is for my daughter. Thankfully, she's too busy with school to watch any of my videos, so she won't know this is coming. But again, you're going to have to work from back to front, which is why I started with the M. And then we're going to attach down our leaves using that same glue. No, I don't want to add too much because I do want to add the button. And you can add the button with the glue, but I want to make sure that it stays on, so I'm going to embroider that on as well. And Miles is coming to say hello. Of course he's coming now while I have a hot glue gun out. Danger is his middle name, I suppose. And I didn't, like I said, didn't want to make that glue too thick because I am going to have to go through that with an embroidery needle to attach my button. And I'll just use some of the blue thread that I have sitting there. And as you notice, I do have some of that orange or gold that's sticking out. But here are all 4 that I made using this die, using the different colors that all came from the Harvest Moon set that I got from Benzie. But isn't this fun? You can make so many fun little gifts. They don't take hardly any time, and they fit perfectly on these little Starbucks cups. I'll have those linked down below if you want to get some. This is the holiday one, but they also have plain white ones. I have some white ones coming in the mail, but I love this. How fun would this be to give as a gift to any of your friends? And it's handmade. Who doesn't love a little handmade? So if you liked this video, please hit that like button and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already done so. And as always, thanks so much for stopping by, and I will see you very soon in another video. Bye, everybody.